Good morning, and so appropriate that that I'm able to follow Mark and Paulus because Kit was one of his fairy godchildren. So, um, I wondered as I was putting this little presentation together. Are we working here? Oh, good. I can't see it, but we're working good. How it's possible to be here in Pittsburgh and not have kids. Certainly, she could have made the drive, and there would have been a couple of good New Hampshire potters with her in her van. How is it possible, I wondered, that she has, I'm going to have to look at this, that she has left this world of digging clay and firing kilns and teaching kids and teaching adults and loading her van for the farmer's market in Portsmouth. How could that have gone away? And until that reality sinks in for me, we'll just have to have some warm and loving memories of Kit. Jerry Williams, then editor of Studio Potter magazine, introduced me to Kit in the late 80s, and he said to me, as those of you who know Jerry will say, would you like to make a difference in the lives of potters in the United States? What would you say when you were confronted with that question? Of course, of course. I said Baltimore Clayworks was just growing, and what an appealing idea. And so pretty soon I found myself working with this energetic, bright, talented potter, and she and I did some pretty wonderful things together. But one of the things that she did with Jerry was found the Studio Potter Network. And she was its newly minted editor when I met her. And soon I found myself traveling around with her in the mid-Atlantic when she would come to visit potters. We even cooked up a Studio Potter Network bed and breakfast, which really had a nice run of it for a while. She enjoyed the artists at Clayworks and really visited pretty frequently in those days. But really, she was from New Hampshire. Now, she had been born in St. Thomas, and she had a wild period where she married a Frenchman, and they had a child named Jacques, and then the Frenchman went away. I never found out what happened to him. But once she got to New Hampshire and took a workshop with Paulus Berenson at Jerry Williams' studio, then she was hooked and became a potter. And she then made pots and set up a pottery in her home in Exeter. She made a teaching studio in the basement. And isn't that where all teaching studios are, right? And she put her sign out on the front lawn, took a big dining room and made it a gallery, and she was good to go. She loved potters. She loved other potters, and the New Hampshire Potters Guild was one of her resting places there, and she loved all the old Asian glazes, the Oribes and the Celadons. She loved firing hot and long in various gas kilns that she had built over the years. And she loved sharing her knowledge and her experience with her students and with other potters and with the public. One of my rare visits to New Hampshire with Kit was the pleasure of going to the farmer's market, where she simply opened the back of her van and people would flock to it. I mean, it's potter's dream, right? So people would flock every Saturday and they would buy pots that had just come out of the kiln. She liked digging clay and making opportunities for the people she worked with and for some students. Now, this is a personal story. Through the 90s, she dragged me along on her adventures. And she made opportunities, as I said, for others. One of the opportunities she made for me was to convince Jonathan Fairbanks, who was then curator of Native American pottery for the Boston Museum. She convinced Jonathan Fairbanks that while we were going to Tempe and Sika, that we needed to make pots with Hopi potters on Third Mesa. I don't know how many of you have visited Third Mesa, but to have two white women show up to make pots is just unheard of. But somehow Jonathan got us in for the fix, and we had a rare and marvelous experience. Another thing she introduced me to, and I'm a Southern woman, she's a New Englander, she introduced me to Rebel Yell whiskey. And we had this is a little out of order, but we had some fine times at Ensika having old-fashioned parties in our room in the hotels. And we were very popular in those days, especially with the younger set. So she also dragged me away to a very rustic art center in northern Georgia called the Hambidge Center, where we try to make collaborative work in clay, throwing, decorating, and that sort of thing. But that did not work out so well for us. It was a very long trip, and the cicada killer wasps and the black snake sort of drove us out. But she was a woman of passion and dedication. She made pots in her studio every day. She loved her children, Jessamy and Jacques, and they were very much in evidence in her studio in New Hampshire when they were in town, and now she had grandchildren that unfortunately I didn't know. She was an insightful woman. She loved social justice, and she made certain that it was very much alive and well at the League of New Hampshire Craftsmen and in her community and nationally. I will always remember that her favorite color was orange, and that she was a champion for inclusion and for the arts and for clay, and that most of all, she was dedicated to making and firing and talking about and teaching our material, clay. And although she is no longer with us in this world, her pots and her influence live among all of us who knew her and will live long after our time, and the joy and the experiences that we shared with her. Thank you very much.